Yes. Yeah, it works. Yay. That's a lame start of a conversation. But anyways, so this week, I'm gonna give a quick status report of what I did this week. I did a bunch of things, actually. This week was very productive for me in terms of JSON API. I worked on getting a Postman collection of many of the things that I think are interesting about the spec, things like including, like how you do gets, puts, posts, etc. And in the process of that, I uncovered a bunch of bugs and recorded them and filed them in the issue queue, and I even fixed some of those. In particular, there was one related to cacheability metadata, where when we were doing an include, the relationship did not expose its own cacheability metadata. So the whole max h0 was bubbled up as it should be, but that was defeating the point, and that was giving me very bad results in terms of the performance analysis that I did this week, and that's kind of the second thing that I did. So initially, I did the Postman collection thing because I wanted to just run the test battery and record the traffic with JMeter, and then do a performance analysis with that. But then I was too lazy because I wanted to compare it with the same, like fetching the same data using REST core with HAL JSON. But then I was lazy. I didn't want to set up all that for core. So anyways, I ended up doing some basic A/B. But I think that the conclusions for the performance test are good, are what you would expect. Most of the work or most of the stuff is going to be cached either by dynamic page cache or by just page cache. I don't know the name of the other one. It's just page cache.
Yep.
Okay. So the big hit, we're taking it with the Bootstrap, and since we are embedding the relationships, we're just doing one Bootstrap, and it takes it's a linear relationship. If you do 3 levels of inclusion, like the base entity, like an article, and then the author, and then the image of the author, or the profile image of the author. If you do 3 levels, you get 3 times better performance, as you would expect. And
right. So it's basically a bootstrap cost B plus 3 times E, for example, like E being the typical or the average cost of loading and rendering, serializing an entity. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So the more you serialize, the less the bootstrap cost is costing you.
But, okay, let me think about that. So what I was seeing is, and let me just pause for a second. I think Gabe's having trouble and can't rejoin. No. Okay, that must have been something else. So what I was saying is that, for instance, if I'm using page cache and I'm doing that call that I just said, even when the cache is warm, I could see, like in my setup, it was 7 milliseconds for JSON API.
For page cache hits.
Yes.
Yep, that sounds about right. Yeah.
So for HAL JSON, however, since I had to wait for the article to come back to know the author ID, and then make the request for the author ID, for the author, and then make the request for the file of the profile image, then it was just 3 times that, 21 milliseconds.
Right, but that means So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the JSON API response with all of the related entities embedded, included, takes 7 milliseconds because it can be cached in its entirety in page cache. And for
Yes.
JSON, your test is simulating what a client would have to do. And so it needs to do multiple requests to Drupal. That means multiple bootstraps. And so that means it's a lot slower.
Yes.
So 3 times 7 milliseconds, probably.
Yeah, I would assume that here I'm minimizing an effect, which is the transport time, which also would play against the core implementation, because I was doing tests against local host.
Right. Yes.
But yeah, I wanted to just.
Yes. Yeah, you have to test without latency. That's what you're saying, right? If imagine that the client is on a mobile network and there is a half a second of latency because it's poorly connected, then that will be quite expensive for JSON, but far less so for JSON API.
Yeah, I also wanted to find any research that would kind of hint how many of these entities are in a page, because that I believe that you need more than 3 levels, of course, to get all the data to render a page. But I couldn't find anything. Obviously, that's too specific, and it would vary on every design.
Right.
But that's pure speculation. You could imagine that you will have a lot of dependent entities, but then it's affected by things that you can load in parallel. So it's by no means a serious study of performance in comparison of these two approaches, but I think that it yields the obvious results that you would expect.
Yeah, I think you're right that the concrete results in the real world would totally depend on the particular website's design or purpose. What you could do is go with the thing that would actually underrepresent the real world performance, which is mimic what the default front page is doing, which is showing, I think, 5 nodes in teaser view mode and also showing the usernames. That alone already means 5 requests for the nodes plus 5 requests for the users potentially. So that alone would already, I'm sure, be much faster in JSON API than it would be with JSON. So that would be the only reference point that most people would understand, I think, or that most people would accept, if you will. Because otherwise you can think of arbitrarily complex examples.
That's a pretty cool idea, actually. I'm probably just going to assume that repeatability of my conclusion so far, but I'm going to calculate how many requests that would take. And since JSON API even comes with collections, you wouldn't need one call for every base entity, but just with one.
Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense if all that fits in your cache bins.
Yeah, I think it would actually be a pretty good way of demonstrating the value of JSON API over something like traditional REST or JSON or even regular JSON, because that shows in a very tangible, very simple way that everybody can understand. Instead of using so many requests, we now only need one. That makes it very clear. And then you can even simulate, I would simulate with maybe 2 different latencies, one local host and another real world, whatever you want, but I would pick something like maybe 20 to 70 milliseconds and maybe one for cross-Atlantic, 100 plus milliseconds. And then you can show, well, with JSON API, it's 1 time that 100 millisecond latency. With JSON and JSON, it's so many times. So then you see how the difference compounds in a very painful way.
Right. Okay. Let me give you a sneak peek of what I had, because I think I'm gonna adapt that if you're fine to show what you were suggesting. So
no, yeah, of course.
This is what I had. Like, it was just a blog post page, which is detail node, and in the next slide I was
oh yeah, that makes sense too. An article with comments, that's also something people know. So yeah, I think that's fine too.
Okay, then I will not.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize you had all this already. Sorry.
No. But yeah, it makes sense to be something that is not a use case of Drupal, but something that ships with
Yes,
Drupal.
yes, yes. I agree. This is much better.
Anyways, so I think that those findings can make it to the project documentation, but there is no rush in that. I'm talking about the performance findings.
Yeah.
And
it could also be a cool blog post on your personal blog or the one at Lullabot, for example. Just saying.
Yeah, that's right.
You've already done the research, so that's the hard part.
Yeah, but I would like to have one of these cool big pipe style videos that you have there, like before and after. Anyways,
right. Yes.
So yeah, apart from that, I started tagging some of the issues, or rather changing the priority to critical, to the ones that I think that are critical. So far, I think we have 2 or 3. I addressed one of those, which is the one that there was a problem when you send the payload for relationships, adding the UUID as the ID of the entity that you wanted to relate to, and there is a patch for that now. I think that Daniel is reviewing that, and I added a bunch of tests to make sure that this doesn't break in the future. And finally, I created a task that I want the impressions of everyone, and I just realized that Gabe dropped again. I kind of feel that there are people using the JSON API module, because some people are reaching out and asking questions, or thanking for the effort, and all that, which is great. However, I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
However,
I think that we should make it easy for people to provide feedback. Right. Oh, okay.
Gabe is having connection problems.
Yeah. Gabe's not rejoining. So in order to make it easy for them to provide feedback, I was hoping that we could just, well, I put a task in the issue queue so anyone could just grab that task and create maybe a web form or Google Doc form or whatever, so we can ask like direct questions, which hopefully are just a bunch of select boxes and then a text field.
Sounds actually like a great idea that I should also do for core REST. Like what is working, what is not.
Yeah, and maybe we could share some of the questionnaire.
Like, let's talk about it later in chat, I guess. That sounds like a great idea. Very cool stuff. I didn't realize you were at this stage yet where you wanted to do performance testing and that sort of thing. So very cool.
To be honest, that was a suggestion. Like all this is this JSON API module is for performance reasons, or at least for developer experience and performance reasons.
Yes.
So the developer experience you can show in a presentation. The performance reasons you can explain in the presentation, but if you don't have numbers, it's kind of less compelling. So it was kind of precipitated by the immediacy of DrupalCon.
Right, that makes sense. Very cool to see here and see all this progress. So what I've been working on is not in JSON API, but something that actually is related in an indirect way. So core REST has improved significantly in 8.2, but what has not improved significantly is its test coverage. So I'm working on comprehensive test coverage for entity resource. So not all resources, well, we only have 2 in Drupal core, entity resource and the database log, the watchdog one, which is not all that valuable. It's much more of a showcase, like you can do this. But entity resource is the key REST resource. It's the one that provides nodes, a term, user role, like all of the entities in Drupal core, you can access through it. But the problem is we don't have full test coverage for every single one of them. We have, at best, superficial coverage, test coverage for some of them, but they're not verifying what the responses look like, for example. So it's totally possible for tests to keep passing, but the response to change completely, which would break people's applications. And it probably also means that we have some things not working entirely as they should or as expected. So I'm working on providing full test coverage, as comprehensive as possible, so that we do not regress there. And I'm doing it in such a way that it's providing a base class for entity resources in general, and then every entity type can provide their own base class. And then the subclasses of your entity type specific base class can provide test coverage for a specific format, so JSON, hell JSON, but also JSON API, which is where this becomes relevant, as well as any authentication provider. So then you can, basically the test classes are just something like node JSON basic auth test extends some base class, and then you fill in 5 or 6 or maybe 8 or so properties, static properties. So you specify it's a specific format, a specific serialization class, a specific authentication provider, a specific header, a MIME type, I mean. And then based on those few parameters, and sometimes to specify customizations for a specific format. For example, hell JSON has its own normalization additions. So a test class needs to provide the expected normalization, but a specific format may have a slightly different one or adjusted one. And so the intent is to make it as simple as possible to add test coverage for additional formats. So for example, JSON API, as well as for additional authentication providers, and to ensure that things keep working. So I'm working hard on making that go forward. I've got it working for nodes and terms at the moment, and only for reading, but also the reading, so GET requests are already better tested than what core is doing. So it takes some time to get this up to speed, but things are going faster and faster. And so hopefully soon it'll be at a stage where you can easily use it for providing JSON API test coverage for all entity resources as well. So then you can test all the combinations of things to make sure that things are working correctly. That's it in short. Hope that is making sense to you as well.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So it sounds like a micro framework for testing your entity resources.
Kind of, yes. But I'm also providing the generic thing so that it works for things other than entity resources as well. But there's not going to be as many variations. But for example, a thing we didn't notice until Drupal 8.2 until 8.1 was out and the 8.2 cycle began, is that you couldn't possibly update comment entities in Drupal 8.0 and 8.1 because of a bug in the normalization and denormalization process. But it only affected comment entities and entities of a particular form, but not nodes. So how would anyone possibly know? Well, they couldn't unless we had this kind of test coverage. So that's the thing I want to make sure that it's working. And it's already uncovered one interesting thing, which is that our XML serialization and deserialization cannot possibly work. There's 0 test coverage for that apparently, and it doesn't work at all. So hopefully, well, XML is not too bad, but hopefully there's not too many of those hidden problems lying around. But if there are, we should know, and we should fix them, or at least be aware of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So I'm just curious here. When you say full test coverage,
yes.
Do you mean like, do you have a way of measuring that? Because I would assume that you are kind of using, well, what kind of tests are you talking about? Are you talking about unit, kernel,
functional?
JavaScript.
So actually, no, not JavaScript functional. Just making requests, and so basically, what I'm doing is I'm pretending I'm a developer, and I'm running through scenarios, and I'm applying the same scenario to every single entity resource. And so I'm first trying to request an entity resource without being authenticated. I'm also doing it without the resource being provisioned. So the config entity to deploy it, to make it available, is not yet present. And so I'm going through different steps and making sure that the response errors that I'm getting are also the ones that guide the developer in the right direction. So I'm asserting not only the things are actually working, I'm also asserting that things, if the developer makes a mistake, that they actually guide them in the right direction. So I'm basically testing the entire process of interacting with Drupal, REST Drupal.
Yeah, I think that we should definitely look into reusing this for
that's the intent, yeah.
For JSON API, or at least providing documentation on how site implementations could do this with their entities.
Right.
JSON,
But so two things. One, the reason that I'm doing this is because we did the same for cache tags support. So we have a similar base class structure and then providing a entity type specific test scenario. Sorry, the scenario is generic, but the entity type specific stuff is in a base class so that there's as little as possible for a specific entity type and as much as possible is shared amongst all of them. And this is what allowed us to be certain that things were working correctly. I want us to be able to feel certain that things are working correctly. And if we can provide that sort of rigor and certainty for REST and core, and if that is accepted then or we all consider that to be indeed, yes, it is verifying all the things that it needs to verify. If we then apply the same, if we just add a few classes to also test JSON API, then we can have the same certainty of JSON API, which will make it so much easier for JSON API to be accepted into Drupal core as an experimental module, and then in the future move towards stable.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like it. So one of the things that we could encounter as a problem and we should be aware of is that JSON API from start took the architectural decision of basing every resource on bundles, because that's what we have schemas for. But I don't see why this couldn't be tweaked to work on bundles.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's fine if we would need to change. I'm certain we will need to change certain things because the URL structure for JSON API is going to look different. So by definition, we would need to have some flexibility in there. But that's exactly what the base class stuff is about. It provides a default functionality and it allows you to override certain things by just overriding a particular method. And yes, that should be okay. It worked out just fine for cache tag test coverage. So I expect the same here. But it's something that is quite labor intensive to get it up to the point where it's comprehensive and all working. But I'm certain it's going to pay off, and it's going to make my life a lot easier as maintainer of REST now. And I think it's going to make your life a lot easier as well.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't mean to say that the test coverage you're right. I haven't even looked into the test coverage that you have today, but I'm certain that there will be JSON API specific stuff as well. But at least the generic portions, like the typical reading, posting of individual entities, that stuff can definitely be covered by this. And then maybe you have the additional support for, or the test coverage for things like filtering and paging and including, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. We do have what I think is a level of testing that I feel comfortable with, but I'm one of those that thinks that you can never test too much. Yes. So if we test this in different ways, it's way more likely to be, tests are not perfect, or no, at least my tests are not perfect.
Nobody's tests are.
So if we test things from different angles, I'm pretty sure that will give us more certainty that things are working fine.
Yep.
So even if we had like 100% test coverage, I would say yes, bring that in. That's a good idea.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that is in that way, I'm helping both Core REST and JSON API, I think. So I'm going to continue to do that. And if you need me on anything in JSON API, just ping me and I'll try to look into it.
I will probably pause mostly everything JSON API related until DrupalCon. So yeah, hopefully I will ping you for something different, maybe
okay.
for a joke or something.
That's good. Hopefully I'll be able to ping you by the time of DrupalCon. Hey, test stuff, it's ready, but we'll see.
Will I see you at DrupalCon?
I'm afraid I won't be at this DrupalCon. First time in a while that I'm not making it to DrupalCon, but yeah, this one I'll not be there. So I'll unfortunately not be seeing you there. So
okay, okay. Well, take a good rest and sorry, couldn't resist. And
I figured.
And I guess that I will see you in some other occasion then.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Awesome. I feel that this was a fantastic update for this week. Many things happened. And I know that Gabe had something to add because he's been working with JSON API. Even if nothing major happened in the issue queue, he's been using it, and I'm pretty sure that he has how things are working from his end. But yeah, he'll be sprinting in the distance as well in DrupalCon, which is great, and we will get that feedback soon.
Awesome.
Anyways, that's it. I'm just cutting it here because I think it's about the perfect time, and
yep.
I don't think that there's anything else.
Nope.
Do you have anything else? No?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. Then see you not next week, but the following one.
Yes. All right. Have a great rest of the week and good DrupalCon.
Yeah, thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.